Hey, what's going on guys, it's FPL Yusuf and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. Today we're going to be going over my top 10 players to avoid ahead of game week 1. And some of these players are highly owned, some range in different prices, but we're going to go over a whole host of players and just have a look at who we should be avoiding before that game week 1 deadline. Okay, welcome back guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today on another video. Before we get into this one, if you wouldn't mind just dropping a thumbs up and subscribing down below, it'd be greatly appreciated. So today we're going to be going over my top 10 players that I've got on this list of who we should be avoiding in ahead of game week 1. Some of these players I think at the start when FPL was first released looked like good enticing options, but as time has gone on, maybe they've shown themselves to be not the best and maybe there are other alternatives that we could go for. Okay, so first up is Dan Burn. Now Dan Burn, obviously, at the start of the season, Newcastle's fixtures, they looked all right, they looked quite good. He was coming in at 4.5 million. He played pretty much most games that when he was fit last season, and he looked like a good overall pick. Newcastle kept 10 clean sheets, despite not being maybe as good as what a lot of us would have expected them to be defensively last season. They still managed to churn them out, but Newcastle only kept 2 clean sheets away from home out of the course of the whole of last season, and 3 of their first 6 games are away from home. And I think Dan Burn's one of those players that, especially now they've been linked with like Mark Gahey, I don't know whether his certainty of minutes is still there as maybe it was when the FPL first released. Lewis Hall's been playing really good in pre-season for Newcastle. Livramento's trying to fight for that right back spot. I just think that there's too many right now. I think there's just too many uncertainties surrounding Dan Burn, and because he's 4.5 million, there's other alternatives out there now. If as we said, if Mark Gahey does get the move to Newcastle, I think most people, if not everyone, will just transfer from Burn to Gahey because he'd start. Whereas Dan Burn, on the other hand, I think that there is just that little bit of uncertainty creeping in around him, and it's a shame because he's a good FPL asset. He's 6'7", he offers a lot. From attacking set pieces, but also defensive set pieces. But I think just overall, and just because the amount of options there are at 4.5 million, I think he's someone that maybe we should look elsewhere for. Okay, so next up on this list is Xiao Pedro. Now, he is someone that I think a lot of people had in their first initial draft on FPL. He was 5.5. He's a penalty taking forward for Brighton. I think a lot of thought behind it was that he was going to get more minutes this season. Now, he did all right last season. Ended up with 9 goals despite not playing maybe as many minutes as we would have liked to see from him. The big concern about him is that he hasn't travelled with Brighton for pre-season, so I don't know whether or not he's going to be ready to go for that first game week back. Now, Brighton obviously have got the likes of Welbeck, Evan Ferguson, so they've got other options there, so they don't have to be solely reliant on him. I think a lot of us probably thought and assumed that this season would be his year, that he would be their main focal point, but the fact he hasn't travelled with them, it leaves a lot of questions surrounding him whether or not he will be fit for game week 1. And I think as we go through this video, you'll see that become more and more of a trend around these type of players, is that are they going to be ready to go for that initial game week 1 deadline? And with Xiao Pedro, I think at 5.5 million, there's only a 0.5 difference between, the likes of Rodrigo Muniz and other players. So I think, because it's not such a big jump, I think there's other alternatives we could look at. And I think maybe on this one, it might be best just to wait and see what happens with him. Okay, next up, the golden boy, Phil Foden. He racked up a massive 19 goals from midfield last year, was player of the season, arguably just the best midfielder in the league. Why is Phil Foden on this list? Now, obviously, England got through to the final of the Euros, so he's naturally going to have a longer extended period of leave. He hasn't played any pre-season games with Man City, as he's still away on holiday now. Pep Guardiola did come out and say that these guys who are coming in late back from the Euros and back from pre-season are going to be very unlikely to compete, A, in the Community Shield, but B, will probably be a doubt for game week 1. There's the likes of Rodri, Foden, John Stones, Kyle Walker. There's a few of them there. The one thing about City have got enough players to cover that, right? They've got enough competition, they've got enough players, they've used a lot of youngsters through pre-season, so they've got enough that should get them through those first sort of 1 or 2 weeks. Now, Foden does worry me a little bit, just because A, he obviously had the extended leave with England, so he's going to have to wait before he comes back. But also, I think with Foden, because there's so many players who can play in that sort of central position, and also out wide for City, I don't know if there's necessarily going to be the rush to get him back in. Chelsea up first, City just beat them 4-2 in a pre-season friendly with basically a under-21 squad. Haaland getting a hat-trick in that game. But if City can do that with that squad, when the likes of Bernardo Silva come back, Doku's there, Savio, De Bruyne even, there's a lot of players who can sort of play in that Foden role. And I don't know whether, Pep would want to risk throwing him in there for Chelsea first up, and they've got Ipswich in game week 2 at the Etihad. So yeah, for me, I think Foden, it's crazy because his ownership is quite high. He's nearly at 30% at the time of recording. But I think, you know, a lot of people end up, you know, setting that one squad for the first week. They wait a couple of weeks, and then as we start to get closer to the deadline, I think you'll see more and more people change it. So yeah, for me, Phil Foden, especially at the price point as well, I think just he's a void at the moment. Right, so coming in at number 4 is Matt Turner. Now, I have touched on him in my previous video about goalkeepers, and if you are someone out there who's actually got Matt Turner in there, please just get rid of him. You know, he's at this point for Forest, he's either third choice, could be even fourth choice at this rate. His Turner's percentage at the time of recording is 23.2%, which is insane. Now, I know he's a 4 million keeper, and a lot of people are going to use a 4 million goalkeeper to free up budget. However, what you'll see is initially people are going to get their game week 1 squad wrong. They're going to get players wrong. There's going to be players who appear that, you know, no one had in their squad, and a lot of people you'll see will wildcard early, and when they realise that Matt Turner's not going to play, they're all going to sell him, and that's going to mean he's going to take a price drop, which means you're going to lose team value from that Turner pick. So if you haven't got Matt Turner, if you're someone who's got him in their squad, please just get rid of him. You know, there's so many other 4 million goalkeepers out there. You know, you could put Fabianski in there, Danny Ward from Leicester. You know, there's so many of them that you could just put in just if you're trying to free up budget. But just please, if you are someone who has got Matt Turner, just get rid of him because he will not play for Forest. Right, so number 5, and this one I'm actually very disappointed about, to be honest with you, because he's someone that if I could guarantee was going to be there game week 1, he would be in my team, no questions, and that is Mateta from Crystal Palace. He had a fantastic season last year, you know, 16 goals in the league, just unbelievable, especially the last sort of 10 games, he was amazing. The problem with him is that he's currently playing for France in the Olympics, and they have got, I believe they've got through to either the quarterfinals or the semi-finals, so it's looking like that they are down as the favourites to go all the way. Now that might not happen, but even if it doesn't and they get knocked out, I still think, you know, by the time he has his holiday, his 2 weeks away or whatever it is, I don't think he'll be back ready to go for game week 1. So for me, it's a shame because there's not really a massive amount of strikers you could choose from that sort of middle bracket, and I think he would be someone that I think a lot of people would gravitate towards. You know, as Crystal Palace do have good opening fixtures, but for me at that price, it's a lot of money to invest in someone who's not going to be there. So for me, I think at some point throughout the season, Mateta will definitely be a viable option, and maybe that might be sooner, as soon as he comes back. But I don't know if he's going to be there ready to go for game week 1. So he, for me, is just an avoid for now. Maybe game week 2, game week 3, once you start rolling transfers, could be a possibility to bring back in then. Now, a controversial one, that is Ollie Watkins. Now, Ollie Watkins, we all know how good he was last season. 19 goals in the league. I think it was like 18 assists. It was something ridiculous, which made him, you know, the most informed striker in the league last year. I think at the start, when FPL dropped the site, I think a lot of people were sort of trying to fit him in. He was a must. I think as the weeks have progressed on, I think a lot of people have started to realise that budget is going to be a problem, and he's coming in at 9 million. So I think a lot of people would prefer just to go over Isaac and save that 0.5. But also, Ollie Watkins massively overperformed his XG last year, and I don't think that there is any way he's going to repeat what he did. You know, the stats-wise last year was just insane. You know, he was just scoring, assisting every single week. And I do wonder if that is going to carry on this year. He will score goals because, you know, Villa are a good side. He's a good forward. But I don't know if the assists will match up, which kind of, I think, boosted his appeal, at least at the start of the season. I think as time has gone on and we've all realised how tight budget is, especially if you own Haaland and Salah, Watkins just becomes someone very difficult to squeeze in, and you have to make more sacrifices across the team, and your team starts to look worse for wear. And I don't know if Ollie Watkins justifies downgrading everybody else in the team. So for me, he's someone that, you know, if you were going to go without Haaland, if you want to go without Salah, maybe you do go for him. I mean, currently at the time of me recording this, he's actually owned by 53% of the game now. I think, like I said, a lot of people will have sort of set their first team in the first week because a lot of us were looking at Ollie Watkins. I think as we start to get closer to the deadline, I think you'll see that number start to fall dramatically, because I think a lot of people probably want to end up going for Haaland, going for Salah, and the budget just won't be there for him. Number 7 on the list is Chris Wood. Now, this one might be a surprise to some of you because he's actually someone that I was contemplating, you know, looking at that third striker spot with him and Muniz. Now, as time has gone on, I've started to be put off more and more by the idea of Chris Wood, and the reason why is because Taiwo Awoniyi is back. You know, he's pushing Chris Wood closer, and I think at the price point that we're looking at here, we're looking at 6 million. I think Muniz, he's a better player, B, arguably has just as good fixtures, and C, there's no competition there. I think the difference between Chris Wood and Taiwo Awoniyi versus Muniz and Raul Jimenez, it's like night and day for me. I think Muniz is Fulham's main number 9. There's no doubt about that. He has the number 9 shirt. He is their main striker. Whereas for Forest, I could see them two rotating. Maybe some games they play together. Maybe some games it's one and the other. And I just think that there's too much risk for rotation there. Now, Chris Wood had a great season last year. 14 goals for him, which I think maybe surprised a lot of people. But I just think with Taiwo Awoniyi back and fit, which is what Chris Wood didn't have to contend with last season, I think that does cause for concern. I think going into game week 1, that's not something you want to have. You don't want to have the headache of wondering whether or not this player is going to play. Is he going to start? It's one less headache that we all could do without. So yeah, for me, if I was looking at the sort of price bracket, as much as I liked Chris Wood, I think now this choice of Muniz has just kind of cemented more and more, and Chris Wood is a player that I would actively just sort of stay away from. Now, Robert Sanchez, he is someone that I think a lot of people were looking at the start of the season for 2 reasons. Number one, because coming in at 4.5 million, a lot of people are going to be looking at a keeper around that price range. But two, all the Chelsea goalkeepers are priced in at 4.5, so it didn't really matter which one you went for. I have to say, I've watched Chelsea's games through pre-season, I'm worried for them defensively. Going forward is a different question, but defensively, they look so bad. Now, I know it's pre-season, and when the league comes round, sometimes people just switch on. I've seen it with Arsenal, years ago under Wenger, we played poor in pre-season, then they turn up in like game week 1 and everyone's ready to go. So, but take that with a pinch of salt. However, because he's 4.5 million, there are other options out there. You've got Miguel from Forest, you've got Flecken from Brentford, you've got Areola from West Ham, so there's other alternatives that you could go for, and I just think with what I've seen from Chelsea in pre-season, I'm not looking impressed. Even if it's not Sanchez in goal, even if it's Petrovic, I'm not impressed with them defensively. And to be honest with you, they're not. That's one team defensively that I do not want to own. Whether it be a defender, a goalkeeper, I just don't want no part of it. I know their fixture swing in game week 2. And it happened the same thing last season where they had a fixture swing very early on in the season. But for me, from what I've seen in this pre-season, it hasn't filled me with confidence. So Robert Sanchez is going to be a player that I actively stay away from. Is going to be nowhere near my starting 11. Okay, penultimate one, Jarrad Branthwaite. A hero for a lot of people last season, especially towards the back end of last season. He popped up with some clutch goals. For me, it's the price which is the biggest effect on this. I think Jarrad Branthwaite is very much a 2 or a 6 point player. So you're heavily reliant on the clean sheets. Now, Everton last season did very well. 12 clean sheets, second only to Arsenal, who got I think 19. So they did very well in terms of defensively. I think for me, if he was a 4.5, I think he would be in everyone's team. Mikalenko wouldn't be talked about. It would be Branthwaite. However, at that 5 million bracket, you kind of want a little bit more, at least on the offensive side of things. And when I look at someone like Munoz or Tariq Mitchell from Crystal Palace coming in at the same price, I just can't justify owning Jarrad Branthwaite. Everton got a mixed bag of fixtures, so it's not the worst, but it's not the best. However, for the price point that you're paying for him, I think it's just a bit too much. He's 0.5 away from someone like Pedro Porro, who, I think a lot of people are going to start to look at now. And I just think when you get to this sort of 5 million bracket, you want more than just a clean sheet. You want that chance that they could get an attacking return. And Jarrad Branthwaite's XG is 0.08, so it's so low that you're not really expecting to score goals. And like I said, when you've got the likes of Muniz or Tariq Mitchell, who are in Crystal Palace aren't bad defensively either. They will keep clean sheets. So I think when you're competing with that, I just think that the price bracket is all wrong for Jarrad Branthwaite this year. If he was 4.5, like I said, he would definitely be there. Mikalenko is someone that I know a lot of people have looked at, and for me, someone that I think I probably will be starting game week 1 with. So I think there's definitely an argument. It's nothing to do with Everton. I think it's on this one, it's just solely the price. I think Branthwaite, for me, is just a little bit too expensive this year. And finally, the last one, and this one pains me, this is why I left it last, is Dominic Solanke. Now, I love Solanke, 19 goals last season. He was fantastic. The reason why I put him here, the reason why he's on this list today is solely just because of Bournemouth's fixtures. It's nothing to do with him. I worry for Bournemouth. Their first 6 fixtures are very, very difficult. If you want to even extend that to their first 10, I would give them maybe 2 games which they've got decent opposition they can play against. One is Leicester, one is Southampton. They play Arsenal, they play City, they play Newcastle, they play Liverpool, they play all the big boys within those first 10 weeks. And for me, it's just at 7.5 million, again, it's the same as Matete. I don't want to invest that money into someone who A, is not going to play, or B, is going to struggle because of the fixtures. And Bournemouth are a good side. Solanke, like I said, he's a fantastic player, and I've got mad love for him. But on this one, just because of their opening fixtures, they start off with Nottingham Forest, on the first game of the season, which isn't a bad fixture by any means. However, like I said, it does take a turn after that, and then they have maybe 2 games against Southampton and Leicester in that first 10. After the first 10 game weeks, though, I think he's going to be someone that I think you'll see a lot of people, because most people will probably wildcard around that time. I think you'll see a lot of people then switch to him. However, just that initial opening run, it's not something that fills me with joy. And, you know, it pains me to do to Solanke because he was such a fantastic asset for last season. But yeah, for me on this one, just because of their fixtures alone, it's just someone that I would just stay away from for these first, at least for the first chunk of the FPL season. I think once, like I said, once you get past game week 10, you know, they have a lot more greens, they've got a lot more fixture swings. So I think then you'll see a lot of people sort of navigate towards him. But I think at least for the initial opening period of FPL, I think he's someone that we should just look to stay away from. Okay, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed it, don't forget to drop a thumbs up and subscribe down below. We are back. We're back in full swing of things now. You know, we're getting closer and closer to that final deadline. I'm going to try and get out as much content as I possibly can. You know, we're going to look into maybe some, I've just done a video now, obviously, of course, of the 10 players to avoid. Maybe I'll do one of like bargain players or just something like that. So there'll be a lot more content from me as we start to get into the run-in towards the game week 1 deadline. But like I said, if you guys have enjoyed this video, don't forget to drop it a thumbs up and subscribe down below. And I'll catch you guys next time.